Have you ever wondered why some homes feel peaceful and others carry a weight you can't quite name? What if the answer has been hanging there all along, right at your front door? What did Saint Teresa discover about the quiet power of the Rosary when it guards the entrance of a home? The Church has taught for centuries that a home is never just walls and a roof. It's spiritual ground. Every door that opens, every corner that gets lived in, can become a source of blessing, or a crack the enemy slips through. Saint Teresa of Avila understood this better than almost anyone. Prayer, she said, doesn't end at the church doors. It begins in the soul and spreads outward into the walls of the home itself. What she taught about the Rosary as a silent shield has been forgotten by most people, but when it's rediscovered, it changes something. Today we're talking about what happens when you hang a rosary at your front door. It isn't a lucky charm. It isn't decoration. It's an act of faith that sets something invisible into motion. If you believe the rosary can protect your home, drop this in the comments. I guard my door with faith. Stay with us, because by the end of this video, we'll share exactly what Saint Teresa promised would happen when a home was consecrated with the rosary, and how to do it the right way, so it actually works. Before we begin, strengthen your faith. Hit like if you believe in the power of prayer, and subscribe if you want protection over your home. Saint Teresa of Avila, a doctor of the Church, understood something modern believers tend to forget. Spiritual life doesn't only happen inside a church or during some grand retreat. The real battle happens in the heart and in the quiet hallways of home. For Teresa, the soul was an interior castle filled with rooms where God Himself lived. But she warned that a castle can be laid siege to from the outside if nobody guards the gates. The same is true of a physical house. Living in it isn't enough. Somebody has to watch over it. In one of her most personal letters, written from the convent of San Jose, Teresa admits her worry over homes that belong to devout people and still remain spiritually exposed. She talked about open doors, not just wooden ones, but thresholds where invisible influences slip through. The devil, she wrote, doesn't need a body to sow discord. He just needs a house where lukewarmness has settled in, where prayer has been forgotten, where sacred signs are missing. Teresa wasn't superstitious. Her spirituality ran deep into Catholic doctrine. But like the great saints, she knew that blessed objects carry weight because they point to something real beyond themselves. In that light, the rosary wasn't a tool for saying prayers and moving on. It was a chain of spiritual protection. When she spoke about placing visible signs of faith in a home, she meant it with total conviction, not as a nice suggestion, but as something the household needed. The entrance of a home, in her view, had to be consecrated ground, a watched border, not symbols for the sake of tradition, but a recognition that this door was a place of passage, and therefore a place of decision. Who comes in? Who stays? Who's really in charge here? In her own community, Teresa kept images and visible signs near the entrances, not to impress visitors, to remind every sister and herself that they lived under God's gaze. She did it for the ones who didn't believe too, so that crossing that threshold, even once, they'd feel something sacred in the air. She believed a soul could be touched by God simply by walking into a space shaped by faith. And what better instrument for that than the rosary, the great weapon of prayer? Back in the 16th century, Teresa already spoke of homes invaded by the noise of the world. She meant gossip, distraction, discord slipping in uninvited. Those words sound almost prophetic today. In an age where everyone's plugged in, it isn't just people who walk through the front door anymore. Images walk in, sounds, ideas, and most of the time, nothing stops them. That's why hanging a rosary at the entrance isn't a relic for decoration. It's a visible border, a declaration. This home belongs to God. Teresa taught that the soul has to guard its thoughts the way a sentry guards the gates of a castle. And just as the soul discerns what it lets in, a home has to build its own defenses. For her, a Catholic household needed moments of prayer, yes, but also sacred space. And that space started at the door. There's a lesser-known episode from Teresa's life that shows this in action. During one of her foundations, the community faced mockery and threats. Someone had defaced the entrance of the convent with insults and symbols hostile to the faith. Teresa didn't respond with anger. She took a rosary, blessed it with holy water, and quietly hung it on the doorframe. Then she gathered the sisters to pray the full rosary in silence, right there at the threshold. Days passed. The threats stopped. And one of the very people who had mocked them the most asked to enter as a novice. A miracle? A coincidence? For Teresa, it was simply what happens when faith gets put into motion. She believed the rosary worked like a chain of light, binding evil, keeping it away. Not through magic, but because it made Mary present. And where Mary is present, the devil doesn't stay. That's an idea worth sitting with, honestly. Is there prayer in your home? Sacred signs? Or just noise and rushing, and doors left open without a second thought? Teresa never demanded grand renovations. She never asked anyone to build a chapel. Just this: a Catholic home should know it isn't alone in the spiritual world. There's a battle underway. Every soul, every family, every door matters. In her final years, she wrote with striking clarity, "Don't let the world in where God dwells, not through word, not through image, not through neglect. Let the first face seen upon entering be the mother who conquered everything in silence." Hanging a rosary at the entrance of your home isn't superstition. It's a response born of faith. It says Christ reigns here through his mother. And Teresa, who fought so many battles through prayer alone, knew that better than most. Few images carry as much weight as the doorway of a home. From scripture to the teachings of the saints, the threshold has always marked the line between sacred and ordinary, between inside and outside, between shelter and exposure. In the book of Exodus, God told the people of Israel to mark their doorposts with the blood of the Lamb, so the angel of death would pass over. He didn't tell them to hide. He didn't ask for long prayers. He asked for one visible act of faith, right there at the threshold. From that moment on, a doorway stopped being just an entrance. It became a sign of belonging, a spiritual statement, a sacred boundary. Cultures throughout history understood this instinctively. Monasteries anointed their entrances with holy water. Villages nailed crosses or medals into wooden doorframes. Over time, that symbolism faded. Now doors swing open to almost anything, anyone, any influence, any hour. Evil in its most patient form doesn't come in shouting. It slips in like a warm breeze, like an accepted thought, like an idea wearing the mask of freedom. And more often than we'd like to admit, it comes right through the front door. How many homes live in constant tension? Arguments, unexplained illness, sadness nobody can name, addictions that repeat generation after generation. Is it genetics, psychology? Or is there something we've let in simply because nobody guarded the door? The Church doesn't shy away from this. It acknowledges real spiritual influences, disturbing presences and forms of oppression that feed on spiritual neglect. This isn't about seeing a demon behind every corner. It's about recognizing that the home is a target, because that's where faith is born, where hearts are formed, where God's love gets passed down, or where all of it quietly falls apart, and that battle starts at the entrance. Teresa saw this clearly. If the soul is a castle, the house is its outer wall. If the enemy meets no resistance at the door, he settles into the living room. He works his way into conversations, into screens, into habits, into relationships. Plenty of Christians keep religious images all through the inside of their home, while the entrance stays bare. No blessing, no sign, no prayer. As if good intentions were enough on their own, as if evil respected neutrality. It doesn't. Evil doesn't respect a passive house. It respects a sealed one, a door that proclaims the name of Christ. And that proclamation shows up in visible signs too. Holy water, a crucifix, an image of the Virgin, and a rosary hanging like a silent sentry. The rosary isn't a magic barrier. But when it's hung with faith, when it becomes a sign of consecration, a daily call to prayer, then yes, it functions as a border. Because wherever Mary is remembered, Jesus is invoked. And wherever Jesus is invoked, darkness doesn't stick around. Countless stories across generations describe what changed after a family hung a visible sign of faith at their door. Nightmares stopped. Strange repeating accidents around the house stopped. Peace came back into hearts. Not superstition, not magic. A spiritual boundary set in place. The threshold speaks its own language. When someone walks in and sees a rosary hanging with reverence, they receive more than a human message. They receive a spiritual one. Something in the soul recognizes it, even without understanding why. There's faith here. There's prayer here. There's a mother watching over this place. Teresa never dealt with the internet or social media, but she fought thoughts and spirits of the world, trying to slip into her foundations all the same. That's why she was so exacting about who came through the door and with what intention, and above all, what gets let in without anyone noticing. That vigilance still matters today. It just looks different. It's not only people crossing the threshold anymore. It's content, images, words, influences that slowly reshape the atmosphere of a home. And when there's no clear sign that a home belongs to God, evil moves in disguised as indifference, as permissiveness, as the slow normalizing of things that used to shock us, as spiritual coldness. Hanging a rosary at the door is more than a nice gesture then. It's a spiritual statement. Prayer happens here. Faith happens here. The mother is invoked here. People will roll their eyes, call it old-fashioned or exaggerated, but saints don't follow trends. They follow a wisdom that doesn't expire. And Teresa, one of the most clear-eyed women in the history of the Church, never spoke without meaning it. She knew the enemy doesn't need to break down walls. He just needs an open door. He needs us to forget that an entrance is a kind of altar. That faith isn't only lived in the heart, but in the spaces we actually inhabit. Hanging a rosary with real faith isn't putting on a show. It's telling the invisible world, this house isn't alone. This family isn't orphaned. Prayer lives here. Peace reigns here. God dwells here. A rosary isn't just beads strung together around a cross. For anyone who grasps what it truly is, the rosary is a sheathed sword, an invisible shield, a living proclamation of the gospel. Its power doesn't come from the object itself. It comes from the prayer it carries, the mystery it recalls, the faith that activates it. Teresa didn't make the daily rosary the center of her devotions, the way Saint Louis de Montfort would popularize centuries later. But she recognized the value of any prayer that placed the soul in conversation with God through Mary. And the rosary, by its very structure, is prayer that teaches, a continuous proclamation of the central truths of our faith. Each Hail Mary is a loving repetition, sure, but it's also a call to stay alert. Decade by decade, the rosary marks the mysteries of salvation, the incarnation, the cross, the resurrection, the glory. And with every step, the soul praying it lines itself up with the story of God. That's why wherever the rosary gets prayed in faith, an atmosphere forms that evil finds uncomfortable. Not because Mary is some decorative figure, but because her presence makes the enemy tremble. Church tradition is full of saints, exorcists, theologians, and everyday believers who've named the Rosary a real weapon of spiritual defense. Padre Pio put it plainly: the Rosary is the weapon against the evils of the world. St. John Paul II called it his favorite prayer and wrote an entire apostolic letter dedicated to renewing it as prayer for families. St. Louis de Montfort went further, saying demons fear one Hail Mary, prayed with faith more than 1,000 exorcisms said without it. These aren't pious exaggerations, they're spiritual realities. When the Rosary is prayed, or even placed as a sign of faith, it changes the atmosphere, because the mysteries of Christ become present again. A home that welcomes it becomes something like a small altar, where the story of salvation gets remembered every single day. Biblically, the Rosary is rooted in two of the most powerful prayers in Scripture: the Our Father, taught by Jesus himself, and the Hail Mary, born from the words of the angel Gabriel and of Elizabeth. Repeating these prayers, the soul isn't just talking, it's joining itself to the Word of God. But the Rosary also asks for meditation, and Teresa taught that meditation is the surest path into deep prayer. Someone who meditates consistently on the mysteries of the Rosary ends up absorbing them. They stop being distant stories and become living facts, written into the heart. And when those mysteries live in a soul, that soul becomes a dwelling place for God. So what happens when a whole family turns their home into a place where those mysteries get remembered every time they walk through the door? The home gets sealed, set apart, consecrated. It steps back from the outside chaos and tells heaven, your mysteries reign here. We remember your passing through. Teresa never used the Rosary as some magical object. No genuine saint ever did. Real faith isn't built on superstition. It's built on signs that carry truth. A rosary hung at the entrance of a home doesn't protect because of its shape. It protects because of what it represents. A life centered on God, watched over by Mary, lit by the mysteries of Christ. Plenty of believers understand this instinctively. They don't hang it out of blind tradition. They hang it out of living conviction. And in doing so, they're proclaiming something to the visible world and the invisible one alike. This house believes. This house prays. This house remembers. Mystically speaking, the Rosary works almost like a chain of light. Every bead a knot of prayer, and those prayers repeated in humility weave a spiritual net that wraps around whoever prays it and whoever lives under that roof. No corner of the home stands apart when a rosary prayed with love hangs at the entrance. Teresa described prayer as a friendship treaty with God, so the rosary can be seen as a daily invitation into that same friendship, a constant reminder that we're not alone, that a mother intercedes, that a sacred story belongs to us, and that even when the world grows loud, home can still be shelter. There's a reason so many people, even ones far from faith, get moved seeing a rosary hanging at a door. There's a reason people reach for it in moments of danger or grief, even people who've never prayed in their life. The human soul recognizes, even in its confusion, the signs that point back to where it came from. And the rosary, silent as it looks, speaks anyway. It speaks of hope, of purity, of struggle, of salvation. Hanging it at the entrance then isn't a small act. It's consecrating the threshold, asking for protection, reminding everyone, family, friends, visitors, even the ones who wish you no good, that this house answers to a different authority, a different name, a different light, and evil knows it. Teresa never spelled it out in these exact words, but her whole life testified to this truth. Where prayer reigns, evil flees. Where faith is active, there's light. Where Mary is remembered, Christ walks in. And when Christ walks in, a house stops being just a space. It becomes a sanctuary. To read Saint Teresa of Avila, is to step into one of the brightest sources of Christian spirituality there is. Her writing isn't only literary, it's a mystical guide, a spiritual battlefield, a lived testimony. When she writes about prayer, she doesn't sound like someone teaching from a pulpit. She sounds like someone who's crossed interior deserts, dark nights, invisible battles that only faith could carry her through. One thread that runs through her writing is the protection of the soul and the need to build an interior life strong enough to resist evil. For Teresa, the world wasn't a neutral backdrop. She recognized real spiritual influences that could disturb the peace of a soul and of a home. In The Way of Perfection, she writes plainly, "The devil is deeply afraid of determined souls. He does not enter a house where there is humble prayer." That line matters. It reveals her whole vision. True prayer isn't just talking to God. It's a wall that shelters. There's no real prayer that fails to protect. So a home that prays and shows it becomes a place the enemy finds uncomfortable. In the same book, she also writes, "God dwells in a recollected soul as in his own home. But if the soul is always scattered, running after 1,000 things without order, how can its guest find rest?" She's speaking about the soul here, but the image carries over naturally to a physical home. If the soul needs stillness and peace for God to dwell there, doesn't the house need something similar? Order, signs, prayer? Another striking passage appears in the interior castle, where Teresa describes spiritual attacks directly. Do not think it's enough to have prayer without guarding the doors, because the enemy comes in wherever we let him. The symbolism of the door is unmistakable here. Her immediate meaning points to the senses and the mind as doors of the soul. But she was speaking the language of castles, of guarded spaces, of watched access points. Carrying that vision over to the physical space we live in isn't a stretch at all. Just as the doors of the mind need guarding, so does the threshold of the home. Her letters carry even more intimate lines. In one, written to a Carmelite sister troubled by unrest in her convent, Teresa answers, "Place an image of Our Lady at the entrance, and each time you pass, bow to her in your heart. You'll see how everything settles." That simple piece of advice holds enormous wisdom. The act of acknowledging Mary's presence, even just glancing at an image by the door, shifts something inward. It brings peace. It protects. Because Mary isn't a decorative symbol. She's mother, guardian, intercessor. Teresa doesn't talk about exorcisms or elaborate rituals. She talks about reverence, humility, small gestures that connect the visible with the invisible. And that's exactly the logic behind a rosary at the door. It isn't decoration, it's a sign, not an object, an act. In the book of her Foundations, Teresa describes real spiritual opposition during the founding of new convents, sudden illness, structural damage, sharp discord. Time after time, these things eased when she called for a full hour of prayer, paired with the rosary and sacred images placed at the entrances. She repeats the same point again and again. Nothing good grows where God isn't insistently invoked. Protection comes when the whole place is consecrated, not just the heart of whoever lives there. Perhaps her most powerful words came near the end, on her deathbed, in one of her final conversations with the sisters at the convent in Alba de Tormes. "Do not be afraid. If you pray with devotion and keep the Virgin at your door, there is no shadow that will not flee before her light." That line sums up everything she taught about prayer and spiritual protection. Good intentions aren't enough. You have to pray. You have to keep Mary near. You have to guard the threshold, because the enemy never rests, and every soul, every home is ground being fought over in silence. Later generations have sometimes read Teresa's spirituality as purely interior, focused only on the soul. That reading misses something. Teresa understood that the soul lives in a body and the body lives in a place. If the place doesn't cooperate with peace, if the space where we live works against prayer, it becomes a battlefield. That's why she cared so much about the cleanliness of her surroundings, the simplicity of the cells, the presence of sacred signs. She knew the environment shapes us. An image at the entrance, a rosary hanging, a well-placed crucifix. These are constant reminders of who really reigns in that place. Many of her contemporaries thought she went too far. But the fruit of her work, the holiness of her foundations, the inexplicable peace of her convents, proved her instincts were exact. Prayer isn't improvised. Spiritual protection isn't left to chance. And a home, however modern, needs signs that declare its faith. Teresa never needed grand resources. She just needed to believe with total conviction and to teach others to do the same. If she were alive today, she probably wouldn't talk about social media or smartphones, but she'd still say the essential thing. Do not leave open the doors through which shadow enters. Place the mother there instead and pray with faith. That's her legacy, and her warning too. Faith doesn't spread through arguments alone. It spreads through what people live. And when those experiences touch the heart, they become testimony. Over the years, thousands of people have shared what happened after they hung a rosary at their front door, not as decoration, not out of inherited habit, but as a deliberate act of faith. And what they describe isn't coincidence, it's transformation. One of the most common threads is peace. Not some vague, sentimental peace. A real, concrete shift in the atmosphere of the home. People who lived in constant tension, in frequent arguments, in a kind of unnamed discomfort, say that after consecrating their home with a rosary at the door and praying it in faith, the whole household changed. Like something invisible had been lifted. Like a weight nobody could name simply left. Maria Teresa, a woman from Guadalajara, shared that for years something felt wrong in her house. Her teenage son suffered constant nightmares. Her husband came home irritable for no clear reason. She herself felt anxious just walking through the door. It was like the house breathed anxiety, she said. On the advice of a religious sister, she hung a blessed rosary at the door and started praying it every morning, the moment she opened her eyes. It wasn't instant, she explains. But after about 2 weeks, the nightmares stopped. My husband, without knowing why, started coming home calmer, and I finally slept again. The house stopped feeling heavy. Then there's Julian, 57, from Monterrey. He wasn't especially devout. After his mother died, a deeply Marian woman, he found an old rosary among her things. He remembered her always saying it protected the house, so he hung it up out of respect, as he puts it. Within days, his niece, who'd stayed away from the family for years, came back to visit. His sister, estranged after a decade-long falling out, called him out of nowhere to make peace. I don't know if it was the rosary or my mother from heaven, but something shifted, he admits. That rosary still hangs there. He prays it every night. Badly maybe, but with real intention, in his own words. Some testimonies point to physical protection. A mother in Puebla described a night of heavy storms when lightning struck close to her home. Several houses nearby suffered electrical or structural damage. Hers stayed untouched. At the entrance hung a small wooden rosary, placed with faith by her husband weeks earlier. I won't call it a miracle, she says, but I know we were protected. A lot of these stories share the same quiet thread. Something shifts inside a person just from seeing, every time they come and go, a sign of faith at the door. The rosary doesn't only calm, it reminds. It makes you pause, even for a second, to cross yourself, to lift an intention, to whisper a Hail Mary. And in that brief moment, the home gets consecrated all over again. a young man named Fernando shared something particularly personal. He lived alone, years into a struggle with pornography addiction. During one of his attempts to reclaim his spiritual life, he went to confession, and the priest suggested surrounding himself with visible signs of prayer. One of them was a rosary at the entrance of his apartment. It wasn't magic, but it helped, he explains. Every time I left or came back, I saw it, and it reminded me of the decision I'd made. It was like having a mother waiting for me at the door. 3 years later, Fernando is free of the addiction and shares his story with other young men. Some describe unexpected conversions sparked by that small gesture. Ana Lucia, a mother of 3, says her oldest son, an agnostic, mocked the rosary she hung at their door, called it ridiculous, old-fashioned. Over time, without anyone pushing him, he started touching it on his way out. He said it was just habit, Ana Lucia recalls. Until one day, in the middle of a personal crisis, he shut himself in his room and came out crying, rosary in hand. He prays with his mother every Sunday now. "That rosary brought him home," she says. What's moving about these stories is how ordinary they are. No dramatic miracles, no perfect structure, quiet, everyday, and real. Because what changes isn't always visible. Sometimes it's the atmosphere. Sometimes it's a shift in the heart. Sometimes it's simply knowing a mother's presence is watching the door. Teresa never left behind a list of rosary miracles, but she understood this language completely. She knew the most powerful things rarely make noise, that real transformation happens on the inside, and that when a home starts looking upward, whatever lives inside it rises too. These stories aren't offered as scientific proof. They're not trying to convince a skeptic, but they are an invitation, a sign that God moves when we open the door to Him, and that Mary walks in when we place her rosary on the threshold. Every story shared here is a seed, and maybe someone listening right now, without even realizing it, will be the next person to hang a rosary at their door and discover for themselves that sometimes one small act of faith is all it takes for everything to start changing. Hanging a rosary at your front door isn't a mechanical habit, and it isn't inherited superstition either. It's a deeply spiritual gesture that needs faith, intention, reverence behind it. For a lot of Catholics, that small sign marks a real turning point for the home. But for it to actually do what it's meant to do, hanging it isn't enough on its own. It has to be a consecration. Teresa taught that every outward act, no matter how small, needs to be carried by an inward movement of love and surrender. Same rule applies here. The rosary itself doesn't protect. It's the faith behind it, the heart that places it, the life of prayer that sustains it. Before getting into the how, it helps to understand what this act really represents. Hanging a rosary at the door is, first, a spiritual declaration. This home stands under Mary's protection. It's also an act of consecration. This house, its people, its daily life, entrusted to her intercession. And it's a constant call to prayer. Every time someone walks in or out, that rosary is a reminder that everything begins and ends in God. Step 1 is inner preparation. Before you hang the rosary, take a moment for personal prayer, alone or with your family. It doesn't need to be elaborate, but it should be sincere. Put yourself in God's presence. Sit in silence. Name your intentions. Ask that this rosary become a living sign of faith, not just something on the wall. Remember, Mary doesn't live in objects. She lives in hearts that are open to her. Step 2 is choosing the right rosary. There's no required style. Wood, metal, cord, handmade, or classic. It doesn't matter. What matters is that it's blessed by a priest. That blessing isn't a formality. It's a real invocation of divine protection over the object, turning it into a channel of grace. If yours isn't blessed yet, bring it to the nearest church. Some people choose a rosary that belonged to someone they loved or one that carries special meaning. That works too, as long as it's done in faith. Step 3 is choosing the exact spot. Ideally, the rosary hangs right at the main entrance of the home. On the door frame, a small hook, near an image of the Virgin, or on a cross. It needs to be visible, but also protected from damage. If your entrance is outdoors, consider a small cover or box to shelter it. Some people pair the rosary with a small image of the Virgin, or a short printed prayer like the Memorare or Hail Mary Most Pure. Step 4 is the prayer of placement. Once you've picked the spot, gather your family if you can, and offer a simple but heartfelt prayer. Use your own words, or this one. Virgin Mary, Mother of God and our Mother, today we consecrate this door and this home to your protection. We ask that this rosary, placed here in faith, become a shield against every evil, a sign of blessing, and a constant call to prayer. Let whoever enters through this door feel your peace, and let whoever lives in this home live in the grace of your Son. Through Christ our Lord, Amen. If you're alone, pray it silently or out loud. What matters is the intention behind it. Some people also pray an Our Father, a Hail Mary, and a Glory Be after placing it, marking the start of a new spiritual season for their home. Step 5 is living a life that matches the gesture. A rosary at the door isn't a lucky charm. It doesn't act on its own. It's a reminder meant to lead somewhere, toward a real life of prayer. So every time you leave or come home, pause for a second. Look at it. Touch the beads. Make the sign of the cross. Whisper a Hail Mary, or simply think, Mary, watch over this home. Small gestures like that build a spiritual atmosphere that changes hearts and the space around them. It also helps to stop once a month with your family in front of the rosary at the door and pray a decade or the whole rosary together. Start of the month, end of a Sunday, or a date that means something to your family. Whatever works. That shared prayer strengthens the family bond and renews Mary's presence in your home. Some people also renew this consecration once a year, especially on Marian feast days, May 13th, August 15th, December 12th. On those days, they clean the rosary, light a candle, pray together, and give thanks for the blessings received. Sometimes a rosary wears out. When that happens, don't just throw it away carelessly. As a blessed object, it deserves respect. You can bury it in a garden, bring it to church to be properly burned, or keep it in a small box as a keepsake of faith. The exact shape of the rosary or the precise spot you hang it isn't really the point. What matters is the act of consecrating your home in faith. Teresa used to say that one single drop of faith in the soul moves more than an ocean of doubt. That faith, however small, is what turns the simplest gesture into a channel of grace. It doesn't matter if you live in a big house or a small apartment. Doesn't matter if you're a full family or living on your own. What matters is what your rosary declares. This space belongs to God. This home is under Mary's protection, and whoever walks through this door will be met with peace. In the spiritual life, doing the right thing on the surface isn't enough. You also have to watch for what quietly empties an act of faith from the inside. Hanging a rosary at the door can be a deep, transforming gesture, but it can also become an empty habit if it isn't matched by a coherent life. That's exactly where a lot of people stumble, thinking the symbol alone is enough without committing to what it actually stands for. Teresa knew this well. Her writings insist that not everything that looks holy is holy, and that devotion bears no fruit unless it grows from a purified heart. She warned firmly against formalism, lukewarmness, inner disorder, and giving up too soon. Those same failures, even now, drain the grace that could flow from a rosary hung in faith. One of the most common mistakes is hanging the rosary as pure decoration, with no spiritual intention behind it. Plenty of people hang it because they saw it at their grandparents' house, or thought it looked nice, or figured it can't hurt. But without prayer, without reverence, without a real offering of the home to God, that gesture carries no spiritual weight. The Rosary isn't a lucky charm. It isn't religious decor. It's a call to ongoing prayer and inner battle. Treating it as decoration can even be disrespectful, reducing it to just another object. Another serious mistake is living in contradiction with the sign you've hung. A rosary at the door means little if resentment festers inside, if children are mistreated, if impurity runs freely through the screens in the house, if Sundays get treated like any other day. Grace doesn't work automatically. God doesn't bless ongoing disorder without real conversion. Teresa put it simply: the castle isn't entered through the front, but through the door of a clean heart. Superstition is another common trap. Some people assume that hanging it guarantees nothing bad can ever happen, as if it were insurance against every physical or spiritual harm. That view edges dangerously close to magical thinking. The Rosary doesn't protect on its own. It's a visible sign of a life of prayer. Mary doesn't function as an automatic shield. She intercedes powerfully for those who trust her, pray, and strive to live in grace. Turning the Rosary into some kind of talisman insults its deeper meaning. Spiritual lukewarmness is another quiet obstacle. Some people hang the Rosary, pray with it once or twice with real enthusiasm, and then forget about it entirely. No more prayer, no more attention, no more honor. The Rosary turns into just another object hanging there, silent. Teresa warned that lukewarmness is more dangerous than visible sin because it lulls the soul to sleep without the soul ever noticing. A Rosary left ignored becomes a quiet witness to abandoned prayer. It doesn't curse, but it doesn't bless either. It simply sits there in the face of indifference. Skipping the blessing is another common oversight. It isn't required for the prayer to be valid, but the sacramental blessing does something real. It elevates the object, ties it to the authority of the Church, and gives it a sacred function. Hanging an unblessed Rosary isn't a sin, but it's an omission that can weaken its spiritual force. Blessing consecrates it, sets it apart from ordinary use, gives it a mission. Watch out too for a lack of consistency in front of your own family. If the Rosary hangs at the door, but the kids never actually see their parents pray, if faith gets preached at the entrance while worldliness rules inside, the whole message falls apart. Outward signs need credible witnesses standing behind them. Teresa insisted on this kind of coherence. Don't teach prayer if you don't live stillness. Don't ask for faith while sowing confusion. The Rosary at the door has to match the spirit of unity, respect, and prayer actually lived inside. There's a subtler mistake too, piling up religious objects without giving them any real life. Some homes have crucifixes, images, medals, rosaries everywhere, and all of it covered in dust. No prayer, no candle lit, no soul behind it. Too many symbols unlived can numb the conscience instead of awakening it. Better to have one Rosary, prayed with love, than a house full of sacred objects and a cold heart. Teresa summed it up simply. One honest tear is worth more than 1,000 empty words. And maybe the most dangerous mistake of all is losing trust in Mary's intercession. Some people, seeing no immediate results, take the Rosary down, grow discouraged, slide back into doubt. But grace doesn't move on our schedule. Mary works quietly, the way she did at Cana. She doesn't force her way in. She waits. She protects, even when you can't see her. And often, the moments you feel nothing at all are when she's covering you the most. Teresa, in her humility, never promised instant results. She trusted always in perseverance. That's the whole secret. Keep going. Even when you feel nothing, even when you see no change, Even if everyone around you laughs it off, even when it seems pointless, keep going, keep the rosary at the door, pray it, touch it, consecrate it, because even if you don't notice, it's working, it's speaking, it's protecting. None of this takes much, just honest faith. The humility to admit that spiritual protection isn't just a gesture, it's a life offered to God. Hang the rosary with love, get it blessed, pray it, live in grace, and the fruit will come. Not always visible, not always immediate, but real, because Mary doesn't stay where nobody invites her. But once the door opens, once a home is handed over to her, she walks in, and peace walks in with her. A rosary hanging at the door is more than a sacred object. It's a living sign that a home has been consecrated to heaven. No voice, yet it speaks. No eyes, yet it watches. It doesn't move, yet it acts. An invisible guardian over everything that happens inside those walls. Plenty of people work hard to protect their homes. Alarms, cameras, reinforced locks. But there are realities no physical system can stop. Deep sadness, constant discouragement, temptations that slip in through screens, silent divisions building underneath the surface. What stops those? What actually protects the soul of a household? That's where the rosary shows its real power, in guarding what can't be seen, not through its own strength, but through the presence it carries. Where there's a rosary, there's remembrance of Mary, and where Mary is, Christ is close, and where Christ dwells, the enemy retreats. Throughout history, the Church has recognized concrete fruits from the rosary, not just for the one praying it, but for everyone living around it. And those fruits, once the rosary is hung with faith at the entrance, start showing up gradually, like light slowly pushing back the dark. The first fruit is spiritual peace. Testimony after testimony points to the same thing. After hanging the rosary, a home grows quieter. Not that every problem vanishes, but the way people face them shifts. Less tension, more patience, clearer decisions. Almost as if the rosary imposed a kind of order in the middle of chaos. The second fruit is family unity. With the rosary present at the door, something changes in how people relate. Just seeing that symbol reminds everyone the space answers to a different authority, that not everything gets settled with shouting or long silences, that a mother is listening, interceding, holding everyone close, and that awareness softens hearts, slowly. Distant families start reconciling, parents and children start listening again, siblings stop fighting over small things. Grace moves quietly, but it moves. The third fruit is protection from spiritual evil, not a magic guarantee, a natural consequence of consecration. Priests have described homes troubled by dark presences, disturbing dreams, a constant sense of heaviness, finding relief after a rosary went up at the door and prayer became a habit. Evil backs off wherever it meets real faith. And a rosary, hung with pure intention, works like a quiet wall. The fourth fruit is conversion. It sounds strange, maybe, but there are countless stories of people far from faith who, seeing a rosary at their own front door, hung by someone else in the family, started changing little by little. First questions, then curiosity, then a real longing to come back to God. Teresa used to say, "A single spark is enough to wake a sleeping soul." Sometimes that spark is the rosary hanging exactly where every day begins and ends. The fifth fruit is faithfulness in prayer. Just seeing the rosary every day, coming and going, works like a constant nudge. It keeps the soul from forgetting. A silent bell calling you back to stillness. And whoever answers that call starts praying. One Hail Mary first, then a decade, then the whole rosary. Without quite noticing, they become someone who prays, and a home where prayer happens becomes a holy home. The sixth fruit is Mary's ongoing presence, not because the rosary forces her to stay, but because she never turns away from those who call on her. Whoever hangs a rosary at their door is telling her plainly, "Mother, this is your home. Come in, stay, reign here." And she does. She comes in, she stays. She reigns, quietly though, not with noise, not demanding, but accompanying. Not imposing, but holding everything steady. And when she's present, everything shifts. The seventh fruit is the daily blessing of the home. With the rosary present, it blesses everyone who crosses the threshold. The one heading off to work, the mother caring for her family, the kids leaving for school, the one coming home exhausted, the one walking in looking for comfort. The rosary isn't just a keepsake, it's a source of blessing. Every bead a prayer waiting to happen. Every glance at it plants a seed, even without a word said, and the Spirit knows exactly when to make it grow. Teresa never spoke directly about a rosary hanging at a door, but she spoke plenty about the soul as a space meant to be filled with constant prayer. And a home is an extension of the soul. So when the space itself is shaped by visible signs of faith, the spirit of the people living there shifts too. Hanging a rosary at the door is like lighting a lamp at night. The darkness might still be out there, but inside, there's light, and that light spreads. Further than you'd expect. The fruit won't always be dramatic. Sometimes it won't show up right away. But grace doesn't fail. It works. Always. Even when you can't see it. Even when you can't feel it. Even when nobody around you understands it. Stay with it and the fruit will come. Fruit of silence. Fruit of peace. Fruit of love. Fruit of salvation. And it can all start with one simple gesture. Hanging a rosary at the door with faith. Teresa didn't live to be admired. She lived to show the way. And she showed it through her work, her prayer, silences that spoke louder than any shout ever could. Her voice still carries the same clarity today. Where there is prayer, there is no fear. Where Mary is, the enemy does not enter. Where God is named, there is victory. Hanging a rosary at your front door is more than a pious habit. It's a choice. A statement, an invisible shield protecting more than walls, protecting hearts. And the people who've done it in faith have witnessed fruit the world struggles to explain, but the soul recognizes instantly. Peace where there used to be tension. Unity where there used to be distance. Light where shadow used to live. You can open that door too, starting today. You can make your home a consecrated place. You can turn your entrance into a sacred threshold, where the Virgin stands guard, evil is stopped in its tracks, and heaven pours out blessing. Not because the object holds power on its own, but because the love behind placing it draws God's presence near. Don't put it off. Don't wait for another sign. One simple gesture today might be the quiet difference that changes everything. Do it with humility. Do it in silence, but do it in faith. And if this message reached your heart, subscribe now and walk with us on this path of prayer, protection, and comfort. Every video we publish is another chance for your soul to grow stronger and for your home to be filled with blessing. Thank you for staying with us until the end. May Saint Teresa intercede for your home. And may the Virgin Mary, her rosary at your door, watch over every corner of your life. See you in the next video.